The smell of gasoline and hot metal hung in the air as Maya tightened the last bolt under the hood of the silver sedan. She'd just replaced the fuel filter. Nothing complicated. Dan waved off the driver's attempt to pay. To her, it was just another small act of kindness in a slow afternoon. But something in his voice as he left made her uneasy. Didn't think folks like you gave out free favors. He'd muttered, just loud enough for her to hear. She tried to brush it off. People like him came and went. The work spoke for itself. 2 hours later, though, the rumble of a diesel engine shook the garage floor. Maya stepped outside to see a massive flatbed pulling in, its cargo unmistakable, the same silver sedan. But this time, its hood was crumpled. Glass shattered, airbags blown, and the driver. He wasn't alone. The sun beat down on Earl's Auto, a squat brick building on the edge of town, with a crooked open sign hanging in the window. The garage wasn't fancy oil stains on the concrete, the scent of motor oil in the air, and a faint radio hum from an old speaker, but for Maya, it was home. She'd grown up here. Summers spent watching her father, Earl, coax life back into engines other mechanics had given up on. Winters spent sipping cocoa in the corner while he worked late into the night, explaining every rattle, hum, and squeak a car could make. Earl was known for his skill and for standing out in this town. Being the only black mechanic in a mostly white, deeply rooted community had never been easy. But Earl carried himself with quiet strength, never letting prejudice keep him from doing honest work. Maya had inherited that same steady resolve. Along with his sharp eye for diagnosing a car's troubles, she'd learned to listen not just to engines, but to people. Because sometimes the real problem wasn't under the hood. That day, the air was thick with the smell of asphalt baking in the heat. Earl had left for the parts store, trusting Maya to handle the shop alone. It wasn't long before she heard the uneven cough of an engine outside. A silver sedan rolled into the driveway, sputtering like it was on its last breath. Behind the wheel was a young man, maybe late 20s. His baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He parked, stepped out, and avoided direct eye contact. "Car's been acting up," he said flatly, his voice carrying a hint of impatience. "Think you can take a look?" Maya nodded, motioning for him to pop the hood. "Let's see what we're working with." Within minutes, she'd spotted the culprit, a clogged fuel filter. Easy fix. She replaced it with a spare they kept in stock, tightening the last clamp with practiced ease. The sedan's engine roared back to life. She smiled, wiping her hands. "All set, you're good to go." The man reached into his wallet, but she shook her head. "Don't worry about it. Filter didn't cost us anything, it was just sitting on the shelf." He froze, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You're just giving it to me? For free?" "Yeah," she said simply. "Sometimes it's just the right thing to do." He hesitated for a beat, then muttered under his breath, "Didn't think folks like you gave out free favors." It was quiet, so quiet he might have thought she wouldn't catch it, but she did. Every word heard her father's voice echoed in her head. "Pick your battles, Maya. Don't let every fool take your piece." So she forced a polite smile. "Drive safe." The man mumbled something unintelligible and slid behind the wheel. The sedan coughed once, then smoothed out as it rolled away, leaving only the faint smell of exhaust in its wake. The rest of the afternoon was slow. Maya swept the garage floor, reorganized the tools on the workbench, and checked the appointment book for the next day, but her mind kept replaying his tone, his expression. She'd heard that kind of thing before, sometimes blunt, sometimes disguised in polite words. That was before she heard the deep rumble of a diesel engine approaching. At first, she thought it was just another customer, but when she stepped to the open garage door, her stomach tightened. A massive flatbed trailer was turning into the lot, its tires crunching over gravel. On its back, the same silver sedan, but now it looked like it had been through a war. The hood was crumpled, the windshield spiderwebbed with cracks, and one headlight dangled by its wiring. The man from earlier was standing on the flatbed's side rail, alongside two other men in matching towing company uniforms. They hopped down before the truck had even fully stopped. One of them called out, his voice sharp. "Where's the owner? We need to talk to Earl." Maya wiped her hands and stepped forward. "He's not here right now. I'm the mechanic." The men exchanged glances, then smirked like they'd just heard a bad joke. "Yeah, sure," one of them said. "Figures." She didn't know exactly what was about to happen, but something in their posture, in their smirks, told her this wasn't just about a broken car anymore. The flatbed's engine coughed to a stop, leaving only the sound of gravel crunching beneath boots. The three men walked toward her with the slow swagger of people who believed they already owned the place. Maya stayed where she was, her feet planted on the oil-stained concrete just inside the garage. Her heart thudded, but her face stayed neutral. The same calm expression her father wore when customers got difficult. The first man, the driver from earlier, spoke first. "You fixed my car this morning." His voice was sharp, like he was daring her to disagree. "I replaced your fuel filter," Maya said evenly. "It was running fine when you left." He gave a short, bitter laugh. "Yeah, then why'd it break down on the highway? Could have got us killed." She stepped forward, glancing at the crumpled hood and shattered glass. "This isn't a breakdown. This is a collision. Your damage came from an impact, not anything I did under the hood." The second man snorted. "Look at her. She thinks she knows better than us." The third man, older and heavier, took a step closer. "Where's Earl? I don't deal with apprentices." "I told you," Maya said, her voice tightening. "I'm the mechanic. My father's out getting parts." The driver's lips curled. "So he just leaves a little girl in charge. Guess I shouldn't be surprised." His gaze flicked deliberately to her skin, then back to her eyes. "Quality of work probably matches the quality of the hire." It was a clean shot, no slurs. Nothing you could take to court, but every word was weighted. Dripping with the assumption that she was less, Maya felt her pulse quicken. Her father had always told her, "Don't meet ignorance with anger, meet it with proof," but right now, proof felt like the last thing these men cared about. "Let's get this over with," she said, walking toward the flatbed. She grabbed a jack and motioned for them to lower the sedan. They watched, arms crossed, as she rolled the car into the bay. She popped the hood, the familiar smell of coolant and burnt oil mixing in the air. Within minutes, she had her answer. She turned to them, holding up a bent fuel line. "This is your problem. It's from the accidency, the crimp, right here. The collision forced it against the frame. That's why the car stalled. Not because of the fuel filter I replaced." The second man waved her off. "Sounds like a convenient excuse to cover bad work." The driver smirked. "You expect us to believe you just happened to find a new problem right after you touched it. Maybe you messed something up, and now you're trying to hide it." The older man leaned on the fender, close enough for her to smell stale cigarettes on his breath. "Here's the deal, we're not paying for a second repair. You'll fix. It's free, and maybe we'll forget this little mistake." Maya stood there, gripping the wrench in her hand, until her knuckles ached. Part of her wanted to throw it across the room. Another part wanted to walk away entirely. But she thought of her father, of all the times he'd told her, every time, "You prove them wrong. You make it harder for the next fool to speak." So she straightened up. "I don't work for free twice, especially when the damage isn't my fault. If you want this fixed, you'll pay for it like any other customer." The driver's smile vanished. His jaw clenched. "You know, your daddy's lucky. Not every business in this town would survive turning away people like us." It wasn't a threat you could take to the police. But in a small town where word traveled fast and bias traveled faster, it was the kind that could stick. The heat from outside seemed to press into the garage, making the air thick and heavy. Finally, the older man muttered something to the driver, too low for Maya to catch. The driver gave her one last look, cold, appraising, and then waved a hand. "Fine, do it. But it better run like new when you're done." Maya exhaled slowly, turning back to the car. As she worked, the men stayed nearby, making low comments to each other, and occasionally glancing her way. She could feel their eyes on her every move, like they were waiting for her to slip up. When she finished replacing the fuel line and tested the engine, it purred like a cat. She stepped back, wiping her hands. "It's fixed. You can take it." The driver pulled a folded bill from his pocket, tossed it onto the workbench without looking at her, and climbed into the sedan. The other two followed in the flatbed. As they pulled away, Maya stood in the doorway, watching the dust rise behind them. She didn't know if they'd leave it alone nor if they'd come back looking for another fight. What she did know was that she'd just stood her ground, and in this town, that was its own kind of victory. The low hum of the sedan's engine faded as it disappeared down the road, leaving behind only the smell of exhaust and the echo of boots on concrete. Maya set the wrench back on the workbench, her hands still buzzing from the tension. She had just turned toward the back room when she heard the familiar squeal of brakes outside. Earl's old pickup rolled into the lot, the fenders rattling like they always had. He stepped out, holding a box of parts, and immediately caught the look on her face. "What happened?" Maya hesitated. "Nothing I couldn't handle." Earl raised an eyebrow. "That your way of saying something happened?" Before she could answer, the low growl of a diesel engine returned. The flatbed was back. The same three men climbed out, this time without the sedan. Earl's gaze flicked from them to Maya, then back. He set the box of parts down slowly. "Afternoon, gentlemen. Something I can help you with?" The driver smirked. "We were just making sure your girl here knows how to do her job. You leave her in charge often." Earl's jaw tightened. "My daughter runs this shop just fine. You here to get work done, or just to waste air?" The older man stepped forward. "She gave us trouble over a simple fix. Got a mouth on her, too. Thought you might want to know before it costs you business." Earl didn't flinch. "If standing up for herself costs me your business, that's a price I'll gladly pay." The driver's smile vanished. He took a step closer, his boots loud on the concrete. "Careful. In a town like this, it's easy to lose customers. Word spreads fast." It wasn't loud, it wasn't even overtly threatening. But Maya knew that tone. She'd heard it whispered in grocery store aisles and muttered behind her father's back for years. Earl took one slow step forward until he was face to face with the driver. "Your right word does spread. And the word in this shop is simple. We fix cars for anyone who walks through that door. But we don't bow to anyone, and we sure don't work for free just because you think we should." The older man scoffed. "Guess you don't want to stay in business long." Earl's voice stayed steady. "Business built on fear isn't worth keeping now. Unless you're here to schedule an actual repair, I suggest you leave my property." The driver's hands curled into fists at his sides. For a tense moment, Maya thought it might get physical. The air in the garage felt heavy, charged, as though even the tools on the wall were holding their breath. Then the driver gave a humorless chuckle. "You know, I thought maybe the stories about this place were exaggerated. Guess I was wrong. Enjoy your little garage, Earl. Won't be long before it's just you and her fixing junkers for scraps." He turned on his heel, the other two following. The flatbed's engine roared to life, and in seconds they were gone, leaving a trail of dust and tension in their wake. Earl stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty driveway. Finally, he turned to Maya. "You okay?" She nodded, though her chest still felt tight. "I'm fine. I just hate that it's always the same. No matter how good we are, they don't see it. They don't want to." Earl placed a grease-stained hand on her shoulder. "Then we keep showing them anyway. Every car we fix, every customer who leaves here happy. It's another crack in the wall they've built in their heads." Maya swallowed hard, the knot in her throat loosening. "You think it matters? That it changes anything?" Earl's eyes softened. "I know it does. Because the only thing hate can't stand is proof that it's wrong. And you, Maya, you prove it every single day you turn a wrench in this shop." But for Maya, the quiet wasn't empty. It was steady, like the calm after a storm, not because the storm had passed, but because she knew she could weather the next one. She looked at the tools on the wall, the grease on her hands, and the open garage door. Somewhere out there, another car would break down. Another driver would pull in. And maybe, just maybe, someone would leave with a different view than they came in with. And if not, she'd still fix their car, because that's what she did. That's who she was. The rest of the afternoon passed in a strange, heavy quiet. Maya kept herself busy changing oil for a regular customer, replacing brake pads on a battered SUV, but the earlier encounter lingered in the corners of her mind like a stubborn stain. Every clang of a tool seemed louder. Every shift of sunlight across the garage floor reminded her of the men's smirks, their condescension, the way they'd spoken about her, like she wasn't even in the room. When the last customer of the day left, Earl closed the garage door and locked it. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky in gold and crimson. He poured 2 mugs of sweet tea from the jug in the fridge, handing one to her. Maya sipped her tea, the cool sweetness cutting through the heat in her chest. I didn't feel like I did. I felt like they still walked away thinking the same thing they thought when they came in. Earl smiled faintly. Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. Either way, you made sure they didn't walk over you. That matters more than you think. They sat in silence for a while. The garage filled with the faint ticking of cooling metal. Maya stared at her hands. Small scars and faint burns from years of work etched across her skin. Sometimes I wonder if it's worth it, fighting the same fight over and over. It's exhausting. Earl's voice was steady. It is exhausting. And it doesn't always feel like you're making progress. But every time you prove someone wrong, you're planting a seed. You might not see it grow, but it's there. And sometimes, the seeds you plant in people are the ones they least expect to take root. You think any of those guys will change? He shrugged. I don't know. But maybe one day, when they're telling a story about a mechanic who knew her stuff, they'll leave out the part where they doubted you because of your skin or your gender. Maybe they'll just remember you as the one who fixed my car, right? And that's a start. That night, as Maya was about to leave, she noticed a small piece of paper wedged under the shop's front door. She pulled it free, unfolding it under the dim porch light. Didn't expect you to actually fix it, right? Guess I was wrong. It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was more than she expected. She slipped the note into her back pocket. Without showing Earl, some things didn't need to be said out loud. The days that followed were business as usual, at least on the surface. Cars came and went. The smell of grease and gasoline lingered in the air. But Maya noticed something different herself. She stood a little taller when greeting customers. She didn't hesitate to tell someone when they were wrong, and she didn't shrink back when they gave her that look. The men never came back. But sometimes, when a flatbed passed by on the road, she found herself glancing toward it, half expecting to see them. She wasn't afraid of the possibility anymore. A week later, a middle-aged woman pulled into the shop in a dented minivan, 2 kids in the back seat. The woman looked tired, her voice trembling as she explained the brakes had started grinding. But she couldn't afford a big repair bill. Maya checked the brakes and found the rotors badly worn but not beyond saving. She resurfaced them instead of replacing them, cutting the cost in half. When she told the woman the bill, the woman's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to thank you. Handing her the keys. Just tell people, we take care of our customers. That's enough. As the van pulled away, Maya caught her reflection in the shop's window. She thought of the note in her pocket, of her father's words, of every time she'd been underestimated and proved them wrong. She wasn't just fixing cars. She was building something stronger. Her reputation, her resilience, and, maybe in some small way, a different future for whoever came next. In a world where some people will always try to put you in a box, sometimes the best way to fight back isn't with shouting or anger, it's with skill, dignity, and the quiet, undeniable proof that you belong exactly where you are. And for Maya, that proof came with every car that rolled into her garage, and every one that rolled back out